You're ready to get writing, start writing, and you've been trolling around on social media because it's what we do these days. And you've seen these things. You've seen, I'm going to write a novel in November. Who's with me? Or uh, a speed word count today. Let's compare how many words that we wrote down and share them. There are two things that I hate enough about these things to bother making this video. One of them, which I'll do briefly, is that people get so sucked into the so-called lifestyle of being a writer that they're not actually doing anything productive. Sitting around talking about the act of writing, hanging around with other wannabe writers, lamenting the challenges of it, sharing the war stories of trying to get through a chapter. This is all a distraction. This is not what you should be doing. There are legitimate times to talk to other writers, to listen to other writers, to get advice from other writers, to be in a community of people who can be a kind of support for you in various ways. But mostly you need to be alone in writing. There's a second tier to that, which is people who can give you industry knowledge, industry advice. This really has nothing to do with the act of writing. This is about agents and publishers and editors and marketing and stuff. That's incredibly helpful. That makes you an industry professional. You can't know it yourself, and you can't learn it by writing. This is why agents and people like this are extremely important and valuable and knowledgeable and helpful, because it's an entire universe and has nothing. And keep in mind, none of those people are writers, right? They're industry professionals, and you need to know those things. It's nice to have that, but it's these other people, the wannabes. There's nothing wrong with wanting to be something, but the way that you graduate is by getting the hell on with it. As Nora Roberts said, ass in chair. Now, the other thing about the word count thing, so all that is a distraction, and they're annoying, and they're sucking your energy and attention and life force. Okay, so remove yourself from these people. They also just make you feel bad about yourself, and they create a standard of writing that is not what you should be reading and is not what you should be aspiring to. So these people are a virus. Isolate them, or yourself from them, if you can't actually isolate them. My children are above my head. I'm wondering if they're coming in. So here's the other thing, though. Here's why it's bad advice. It is common for writers to talk about word count. A book is made up of words. Yes, it's made up of sentences and paragraphs and all sorts of other things and magical things, but it's words. And authors have a tendency to count words, and there are some legitimate reasons for doing this. One of them is that sometimes you're paid by the word, rarely, but used to happen. Second thing is that certain things that you're writing need to be a certain length. A novel is going to be about 100,000 words. Might be 90, might be 130, but you're in the 100,000 word zone. So if like, what was his name in Wonder Boys? Oh, I forgot his name. Grady. Anyway, in Michael Chabon's Wonder Boys, he's written a 2,500 word novel that has no end in sight. So to some extent, you need to know 2,500 page book, no end in sight. That's important to know. You need to know that you're outside the scope of storytelling. At that point, you're lost in chaos. And other times, a lot of people who back in the day, in the 50s, 60s, 70s, and to some extent 80s, writers also worked a lot or often with magazines or newspapers, and word count was a very specific thing then, because this is before computers, I mean personal computers, is the typesetting was done by hand. And that meant that it was very clear how much space you had in order to get things done. None of those things matter anymore. What matters now is, as always, but really only now, is telling a good story. There are many different forms, many different lengths, many different venues. Nobody's setting stuff by hand anymore. Length can vary. It's mostly about attention, whether you can hold people's attention for 500 words, 800 words, 100,000 words, or over series, possibly 1,000,000 words. So there's a history to why word count has been a thing. Plus, it's on your word processing program, and it's in your face, which you might consider turning off, by the way. But the reason it's a fallacy is this: while writers are always talking about it, you don't hear musicians talking about it. You don't hear musicians going, "Today I'm going to write 8 bars. I'm going to write 15 notes. I'm going to write 312 notes. I'm going to write 800 notes today. Who's with me?" It's not a thing. It's not a conversation. You don't hear dancers talking about that. "Today we're going to do 15 gestures. We're going to stick out our leg 19 times. We're going to bend 41 times. Who's with me?" These are nonsensical measures, right? I mean, you could measure all these things. You can go to the Bolshoi Ballet, and you can actually measure every time a ballet dancer's leg bends more than 12 degrees. I have no idea why one would bother doing such a thing, but it is literally measurable, at the end of which you have measured something and have no interpretive basis for making any claim about anything, but it can be done. Dancers don't talk like that, right? A choreography is going to be starting off with questions about, what am I trying to achieve in this dance? What am I trying to communicate? What's the mood? What's the audience? What's the setting? What kind of sound is going to accompany this? Is it going to be music? Is it going to be a particular track? Or is it going to be something else? What's the relationship between the dancer and to the sound, the dancer to the audience, the dancer to the story, to all kinds of stuff. Very interesting stuff, important stuff that you got to get your head around in order to be able to achieve something. But all that requires some thinking. They may not be actually choreographing yet. Same thing with the musician. The musician may be saying, well, I'm going to write a blues song, or I'm going to write a jazz song, or I'm going to write something in 5/4 time. But they're not counting the number of notes they're doing. This is similar to us. We're all writing, we're all creating something out of nothing. And that first step requires thought, planning, consideration. Now, during that, you're going to need to footsteps, doors, ambient sounds. During that thinking process, there's different ways of attending to it. And this is going to depend a lot on the kind of person you are and the way that you like to work with ideas. And I don't think there's a right answer to this, I don't think there's a universal answer to this. I think there is a right way for you to do this now, meaning that you might evolve over time and you might find that techniques change. For example, I don't like plotting things out in advance. I like knowing where I'm starting. I like to have a sense of where I'm ending. I might have a couple of scenes in the course of the story that have begun to take some shape, and I kind of want to maneuver towards them. But generally speaking, I'm concerned with themes and moods and characters and setting and sort of world building. And once I feel that I have a sense of what kind of universe I'm creating, I'm ready to start going. I get a hunger to do it. And I feel that once I feel the hunger to start writing, I'm kind of mixing my metaphors, but then I do it. I'm not going to stop myself from writing if I'm in the mood to, and nor should you. If you're in the mood, go for it, right? Because that mood doesn't always come. But I like to work the words. I like to get things down on the page. I like to struggle with the first chapter for weeks. I like to start writing and then wondering and seeing what I've written and wondering if maybe it's becoming too expository and there's not enough action and I'm starting to get bored, or whether it's all dialogue, but I've lost that sense of setting and mood that I knew I wanted to establish going in. And so I'm rereading it and I'm rereading it. I'm rereading it and I'm writing and I'm adjusting, and it's quite messy. And I tend not to dive 30,000 words in and then go back. I tend to mess around with that first 5, 10, 15,000 words quite a lot until I feel that it's like a plinth, right? It's that solid thing. It's that bottom part of the statue on which, like a pedestal, on which the statue itself rests. The plinth, it's called. And I like to build that and make sure that I'm really, really happy with the foundation of it. This isn't the only way to do it. Some people find that the creation destruction is really, really hard. And when I was a beginning writer, when I was really just starting off, I loved some of my sentences and I loved the description, and I got so wedded to some of those things, I let them guide me more than the higher order concerns that really should be guiding you, which is, why am I telling them this? Is this moving the story forward in some way? Is this creating a foundation that's going to help people better engage the story, right? Get into it, or setting things up plot-wise that are going to have either reveals or be relevant later on, or is it driving the action forward, just getting you moving? Which is a great feeling. That's what you want when you're reading. You want to turn the pages because you want to know what's going to happen next, emotionally, behaviorally, any number of reasons. Doesn't matter why, right? Could just be you want to know how that chicken joke lands, right? There's a lot of good reasons to keep turning the page, but they got to be in there. They got to be in there. So the word count thing is, you're not really producing words, because you might be erasing more words today than you created. As I like to joke often, a good day writing is sometimes more words, but a good day editing is fewer words, at the end of the day. And that beginning part is both creating and editing. It's both creation and destruction. And it's a churning process at the beginning. So the number of words you created or destroyed at the beginning doesn't really matter. And therefore, measuring them is distracting. And more to the point, it can be disheartening, because one day I have 10,000 words on the page. The next day I have 8,000. But the book is better. The betterness is what you're going for. The sense of progression is what you're going for. As Gardner talked about it, allegedly from Aristotle, the sense of profluence, the sense that you're getting somewhere. That's what you're trying to do. These are the things that are hard to measure, and so we don't, but are real, and in another universe are measurable. When I say another universe, I mean, if you were a social scientist and you actually wanted to cross the bridge over into studying text and the way that the way that authors produce stories, you could come up with a means of seeing progress. But nobody ever studies this. This is why there's such bad theory in literature, or more to the point, on the practice of writing, because nobody studies the practice of writing. This practice of writing would be watching or having a computer program that noted every single word that was being entered, everything that was being destroyed over time, in real time, like over a year, over 2 years, over 3 years, from which patterns could be observed, open coding could be created. Using grounded theory, you could begin to find patterns in the data and begin to understand how actual practice happens. But nobody ever studies that. That's not a thing. That nobody does that. And God knows I'm not going to bother wasting my time anymore. I'm actually a social scientist. I have a PhD in social sciences. And I'm rather good at it. Research design is a thing. And you can be good at it. I had a certain artistic bend for knowing what makes something knowable, and I enjoyed that. But what that helps me do right now is look around to see all the things people are saying and see whether it is reposed upon strong arguments based on work about what's knowable. And I can often find that no, it's actually just ideological nonsense. So you want to sort of nip that in the bud, or snip the rope and let the weight fall off. You don't need this thing. Once you get rolling, however, once your story's going, once you know your characters, and once you're in it, right? Once there's a bear chasing a skier in your story, um, you're gonna feel a sense of momentum, just like that skier is, right? And you might not know whether or not he's going to hit a tree, get eaten by the bear. Suddenly, there's going to be an avalanche, which is going to send the bear past the skier. I don't know, right? That's up to you, and that's part of the fun of it. That's part of the fun of writing, because you almost feel like you're reading it at that point, right? The momentum is there. At that point, you can start to revel a little bit and enjoy the word count process. You know, I've had days where I've written 3,000, 3,500 words, and they all end up in the novel, right? And you go downstairs and you're in this trance and you're just cranking out material. And it's just, it's like you're in the joke, you're in the joy, you're in, what rappers call the flow. That it is exactly what they're feeling, right? Or at least as they describe it. God knows I don't rap, but when I hear them describe what they're feeling when they're doing this, they are describing what I am feeling as a writer. When you're just in it, it's what I play guitar, not very well, but I play guitar. There's certain times where you don't know what your hands are doing, and it's just overcoming you. Suddenly your right hand has rhythm that you forgot about, and your left hand is taking risks that usually you don't take, and it's exploring different notes, different combinations. It's reaching for that note on the G string that you always miss, right? B string, G string. Why did G string come to mind? I don't know. Bach, error in a G string. Now I can't remember what I was talking about. You'll enjoy the word count stuff, but only later on in the process. And another way to think of it is like a what do you call it? A slingshot, right? Catapult, slingshot. It takes a while. You got to pull that thing back, pull it back, and aim. Once you let go, that thing's gonna fly. But this can take time, right? I mean, I guess pulling it back doesn't take time, but lining up your shot, lining up that shot, or being a sniper, right? Or bow and arrow is the same way. You got to line up the shot. The execution of the shot might take a moment, but lining it up takes a little time. Lining it up could be outlining it. It could be messing around by just writing and destroying, trying to figure out what you're doing. Don't get caught up in the word count thing, especially at the beginning of the process. Later, when your spouse wants to know if you've been productive that day, you are going to need to have some evidence of book. So yeah, later, when you're in the mid game, right? When you're towards the end game, but particularly in that middle zone, that end of the first act, all through the second act, beginning of the third act, assuming it's broken down that way, that's the bell curve. That's when you're going to be producing more stuff. And the word count's going to help you out a little bit. But stop competing. Stop listening to other people. Don't go on the internet. Get off the internet. Stay away from people like this. Listen to a teacher, listen to a friend, somebody else, if you need somebody to confide in. But ignore the arbitrary pressures that are based on nothing. There's no theory there. Their arguments about why you should be producing more or fewer words, compare that to what I just said for 20 minutes. If it sounds as rich, sophisticated, detailed, I'm giving myself some credit here, but I've thought about this stuff. If it is as well argued and clearly considered, then by all means allow yourself to be convinced by it and move on. I mean, be convinced by compelling arguments. But if it's just a lot of clickbait nonsense, please stop. Spend your time on your story. That's the time it's going to be spent. And put words on paper, but don't be afraid to destroy them. My estimate is until you've written somewhere between 500,000 and 1 million words, you are probably not going to write a really good book. So start doing that. That is not ending on a contrary note about word counts, but I'm saying by the time you've written 4 or 5 manuscripts that are not good enough, you'll learn your craft. I don't really care per day, but I am saying there's a certain measure of expertise that you're going to have to blow a certain number of notes. You're going to have to dance a certain number of dances before you're any good at what you're doing. But nobody's sitting around counting the notes or counting the flailing of the arms. So get writing, but stop worrying so much about tiny little measures. This is not a series of tweets. It's a story, and a story that becomes a novel, and a novel that is going to move the hearts and minds and souls of other human beings. That's it for the day. Get writing.